I'm standing in the doorway of Lucia's, the restaurant where Tom and I were supposed to be celebrating our 15th anniversary, and my heart is doing something I've never felt before. It's not breaking. Breaking would be too clean, too final. This is a slow implosion, like a building collapsing floor by floor while I'm still inside. Tom is at table 12, the one by the window with the view of the Brooklyn Bridge lit up like a promise we made 15 years ago. But he's not alone. She's young, maybe 28, with glossy dark hair that catches the candlelight, and she's laughing at something he just said. Her hand is on the table, inches from his, and I watch as his fingers creep closer, a slow-motion betrayal that makes my stomach turn to ice. I can't breathe. The hostess is asking if I have a reservation, her voice floating toward me from somewhere far away, but I can't form words. All I can do is stare at my husband, the man who called me 2 hours ago to say he forgot about our date because of a last-minute business emergency. Sitting here with her like they're the only two people in the world. The sound of silverware clinking against plates becomes deafening. Someone's perfume, too sweet and cloying, makes my stomach lurch. The warm amber lighting that's supposed to create romance feels oppressive now, suffocating. I grip the edge of the hostess stand, my knuckles going white, because if I don't hold on to something solid, I might just float away from my own body. This is what dissociation feels like. I think distantly. This is what it means to watch your life shatter from outside yourself. Tom leans in closer to her, his body language open and engaged in a way I haven't seen in years. When was the last time he looked at me like that? When was the last time I made him laugh with that kind of genuine delight? The questions spiral through my mind, each one cutting deeper than the last. She touches her hair, a flirtatious gesture, and Tom mirrors her energy, his eyes never leaving her face. They're in sync, these two people, moving through some choreography I wasn't invited to learn. The hostess is still talking, concern creeping into her voice now. "Ma'am, are you all right? Do you need to sit down?" I finally tear my eyes away from table 12 and look at her. She's young, maybe 25, with kind eyes and a practiced smile that's starting to falter. She sees something in my face that makes her step back slightly. "I'm fine," I manage to say, though my voice sounds like it belongs to someone else. I made a mistake. Wrong restaurant. The lie tastes bitter, but it's easier than the truth. The truth is too big, too raw, too devastating to speak aloud to a stranger in a restaurant doorway. I turn and walk back out into the November cold, my breath coming in short gasps that cloud the air in front of me. The sidewalk is crowded with couples heading to dinner, friends laughing on their way to bars, people living their normal lives while mine detonates silently inside my chest. I make it half a block before I have to stop, pressing my back against a brick wall, trying to remember how to breathe like a person who hasn't just seen her entire marriage revealed as a lie. My phone buzzes in my purse. For a wild moment, I think it might be Tom, that somehow he sensed my presence in the restaurant, that he's calling to explain or apologize or something. But when I pull it out with shaking hands, it's just a text from Emma asking what time I'll be home. Normal. Everything is supposed to be normal. I'm supposed to be celebrating my anniversary right now, laughing over wine with my husband, reminiscing about 15 years of marriage. Instead, I'm standing on a Brooklyn street corner, watching my breath fog in the cold air, trying to figure out how to go home and pretend I didn't just see what I saw. 3 months earlier, I thought I knew what my life was. I was Linda Morrison, 42 years old, mother of 2 beautiful children, wife to Tom Morrison, one of Brooklyn's most successful real estate developers. We lived in a brownstone on a tree-lined street where neighbors knew each other's names and kids played stickball in the summer. I was a freelance writer working from home, crafting marketing copy for small businesses and the occasional personal essay that made me feel like I still had my own voice. Tom would kiss me goodbye every morning before heading to his office in Manhattan. his cologne lingering in the hallway long after he left. Our daughter Emma was 14, all braces and attitude, while our son Jake at 11 still thought I hung the moon. We had Sunday dinners with Tom's parents in Queens, where his mother would make her famous lasagna and his father would argue about the Yankees. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and I thought that was enough. But looking back now, with the cruel clarity that comes from having your life torn apart, I can see the small signs I missed. Or maybe I didn't miss them. Maybe I saw them and chose to look away, to preserve the illusion of happiness I'd worked so hard to build. Tom had been distant for months, maybe longer. He'd stopped reaching for me in bed, stopped asking about my day with any real interest, stopped being present even when he was physically in the room. I'd chalked it up to stress, to the pressures of running a business in one of the most competitive cities in the world. I'd told myself that all marriages go through phases, that this was just a rough patch we'd work through like we'd worked through everything else. How naive I was. How willing to accept crumbs of attention and call it love. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday evening in late September. Tom and I had plans to try the new Italian place in Dumbo, the one that had been written up in the Times. I'd bought a new dress, navy blue with a subtle pattern that made me feel like more than just someone's mom. I'd even gone to the salon that afternoon, getting my hair blown out in loose waves that made me look younger, more like the woman Tom had married instead of the one who'd been slowly disappearing into carpools and grocery lists. I was waiting in the living room, checking my phone every few minutes when Tom called at 7:15. His voice had that apologetic lilt I'd heard 1,000 times before, the one that meant he was about to disappoint me but expected me to understand. A client had called with an emergency, he said. One of his major deals was falling through, and he needed to meet with investors immediately. Could we reschedule for next week? I looked down at my new dress, at the unopened bottle of wine I'd picked up from the liquor store, at the candles I'd already lit on the dining room table because I'd planned to come home to something romantic. Sure, I'd said, keeping my voice light. No problem. We'll do it next week. But as I hung up, something settled in my chest, something cold and heavy that I couldn't quite name. I remember walking upstairs to change out of that dress, catching sight of myself in the full-length mirror in our bedroom. The woman looking back at me seemed tired, sad in a way that went deeper than one canceled date. When had I started looking so defeated? When had the light gone out of my eyes? I stood there for a long moment, really seeing myself for the first time in months, and I didn't like what I saw. But instead of investigating that feeling, instead of sitting with the discomfort and asking myself hard questions, I pushed it down. I changed into yoga pants and an old sweatshirt. I blew out the candles. I put the wine back in the fridge. And I told myself everything was fine. That's what we do, isn't it? We women who've been taught to be accommodating, to be understanding, to put everyone else's needs before our own. We feel something wrong, something off. But instead of trusting that instinct, we silence it. We tell ourselves we're being dramatic, paranoid, difficult. We gaslight ourselves before anyone else gets the chance. And by the time we finally listen to that inner voice, it's often too late to prevent the damage. We're left picking up pieces of a life we should have questioned months or years earlier. The next morning, I found myself watching Tom more closely as he got ready for work. He seemed normal, maybe a little distracted, but nothing that set off alarms. He kissed me goodbye, told me he loved me, reminded me that Jake had soccer practice at 4. I went through my day, writing copy for a boutique hotel in the village, doing laundry, making dinner. But that cold, heavy feeling didn't leave. It sat there like a stone in my stomach, weighing me down even as I went through the motions of my life. I told myself I was being paranoid. Tom had canceled plans before. His work was demanding, unpredictable. Real estate in New York was cutthroat, and he'd built his business from nothing, working 70-hour weeks to give us the life we had. I should be grateful, not suspicious. But gratitude and suspicion had started sleeping in the same bed, and I couldn't tell them apart anymore. That afternoon, while folding laundry in the bedroom, I found myself looking at Tom's side of the closet with new eyes. His clothes had always been nice, but lately they seemed nicer. New shirts I didn't remember buying for him, shoes that looked expensive and barely worn. When had he gotten so concerned with his appearance? Tom had never been vain, had never been the type to spend hours in front of the mirror or obsess over designer labels. But now I noticed the way his suits fit better, like he'd been working out and had them tailored. I noticed the new cologne on his dresser, something younger and sharper than his usual scent. I noticed all these small changes that on their own meant nothing, but together painted a picture I was terrified to see clearly. I know what you're thinking right now. You're yelling at me through your screen, telling me I should have known something was wrong, that a woman always knows when her husband is lying. But here's what they don't tell you about betrayal. It doesn't announce itself with sirens and flashing lights. It creeps in slowly, disguised as work stress and forgotten anniversaries, and the gradual erosion of small intimacies. You don't wake up one day and realize your marriage is a lie. You wake up 1,000 days in a row, each one feeling slightly more hollow than the last, until you're living in a house that looks like love but sounds like silence. And the thing about silence is that it's comfortable. It's safe. You can fill silence with whatever story you want to tell yourself, whatever narrative makes it possible to get out of bed in the morning and face another day of pretending everything is fine. I'd become an expert at filling silence, at creating elaborate explanations for Tom's behavior that protected me from having to face uncomfortable truths. He was working hard for our family. He was stressed about the market. He was getting older and having a mild midlife crisis that he'd work through. Any explanation was better than the one that was slowly, inexorably revealing itself, that my husband was falling in love with someone else. The week after Tom canceled our date, I noticed other things. Small things that on their own meant nothing, but together formed a pattern I couldn't ignore. He was on his phone more, typing messages late at night after he thought I was asleep. He'd started going to the gym before work, something he'd never done in 15 years of marriage, coming home at 7 in the morning with wet hair and a story about beating traffic. He was dressing better, too, wearing the expensive shirts I'd bought him for Christmas that had been hanging in the closet with the tags still on. When I asked about his day, his answers became vague, general, stripped of the specific details that used to pepper his stories. He'd tell me about meetings and deals and difficult clients, but never names, never locations, never anything I could hold on to. It was like trying to grab smoke. One evening, I tried to break through the distance between us. I made his favorite dinner, pot roast with roasted vegetables, the meal I'd made on our first anniversary when we were still living in that tiny apartment in Astoria and couldn't afford to go out. I set the table with candles, poured wine, put on music we used to listen to when we were young, and everything felt possible. Tom came home at 8, later than he'd said he would, and seemed surprised by the effort. "What's the occasion?" he asked, loosening his tie, and I tried not to feel hurt that he thought there needed to be an occasion for me to make him dinner. "No occasion," I said lightly. "Just wanted to do something nice." We sat down to eat, and I asked him about a project he'd mentioned a few weeks ago, a development in Williamsburg he'd been excited about. But he brushed off my questions, gave me one-word answers, kept checking his phone even though I'd asked him to leave it in the other room. I watched him push food around his plate, his mind clearly somewhere else, and I felt something inside me wither. This was my husband, the man I'd chosen to build a life with, and I couldn't even hold his attention through a dinner I'd spent 2 hours preparing. "Tom," I said finally, setting down my fork, "are we okay?" He looked up at me, startled, like he'd forgotten I was there. "What? Yeah, of course. Why?" I gestured at the table, at the untouched food, at the space between us that felt wider than the few feet of oak wood. "You seem distant lately, like you're not really here even when you're home." He sighed, that particular sigh that meant I was being needy, demanding too much. "Linda, I'm just stressed about work. The market is unpredictable right now, and I've got a lot of pressure from investors. Can we not turn dinner into an interrogation? And just like that, he'd flipped it. My concern became an attack. My attempt at connection became an interrogation. I apologized because that's what I always did, and we finished the meal in silence. That night, lying next to him in bed, I felt lonelier than I'd ever felt in my life. And I wondered when the distance between us had become so vast that I couldn't reach him anymore, no matter how hard I tried. The real shift happened on a Thursday afternoon in early October. I was working at my desk when my phone buzzed with a notification from our bank. Tom had used our credit card at a restaurant in Manhattan, charging $473. My first thought was that he was entertaining clients, something he did regularly. But then I looked at the name of the restaurant. Le Bernardin, one of the most romantic spots in the city, the kind of place you take someone when you're trying to impress them. Tom had never taken me there. Not once in 15 years. I stared at that notification for a full 5 minutes, my mind trying to construct an innocent explanation. Maybe it was a business dinner. Maybe he was celebrating a deal. Maybe I was losing my mind, seeing ghosts in every shadow. I almost convinced myself too. Almost. But that stone in my stomach had grown heavier, sharper, cutting into me with each breath. I sat at my desk, unable to focus on work, staring at that notification like it might reveal some hidden truth if I looked at it long enough. $473. What kind of business dinner costs that much? I pulled up Le Bernardin's menu online, scanning the prices, doing mental math. That would be 2 tasting menus, wine pairings, probably champagne to start. The kind of meal you have when you're celebrating something special. Or when you're trying to seduce someone. My hands were shaking as I minimized the browser window, as if someone might be watching over my shoulder, as if the act of investigating my own husband was something shameful. And maybe it was. Maybe this was the moment when I crossed from trusting wife into suspicious shrew, the kind of woman who monitors her husband's spending and interrogates him about his whereabouts. But trust is a fragile thing, and mine was already fractured. All it took was one more crack for the whole thing to shatter. That night, I did something I'd never done before. While Tom was in the shower, I went through his jacket pockets. My heart was hammering so hard I thought I might pass out as I carefully pulled receipts from the inner pocket of his suit jacket, the one hanging on the back of our bedroom chair. My hands were shaking as I unfolded them one by one. Lunch at a deli, coffee from Starbucks, a drugstore receipt for gum and hand sanitizer. Nothing incriminating, nothing that proved anything. And then, folded small at the bottom of the pile, I found it. A receipt from Le Bernardin, time-stamped at 9:30 p.m., listing 2 glasses of champagne, 2 appetizers, 2 entrees, 2 desserts, 2 of everything. The handwriting at the bottom, in the tip line, was Tom's, and he'd written a note. Thank you for a perfect evening. I stood there in our bedroom, the receipt burning in my hand, and I felt something inside me crack wide open. This wasn't a business dinner. This was a date. My husband had taken someone else to the kind of restaurant he'd never taken me to, and he'd called it a perfect evening. The sound of the shower running in the bathroom became loud in my ears, almost deafening. I had maybe 2 more minutes before Tom finished, before he'd come out and find me standing here with evidence of his betrayal in my hands. I took a photo of the receipt with my phone, hands shaking so badly I had to take 3 attempts before the image was clear enough to read. Then I carefully folded it back up, returned it to his jacket pocket exactly where I'd found it, and sat down on the edge of our bed, trying to slow my racing heart, trying to figure out what to do with this terrible knowledge that was burning a hole through my chest. When Tom came out of the bathroom, towel wrapped around his waist, water still beating on his shoulders, I was sitting there with what I hoped was a neutral expression on my face. But something in my eyes must have given me away, because he paused, looking at me with concern. "You okay?" he asked. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the receipt at him, to demand the truth, to force him to explain who he'd taken to Le Bernardin and why he'd never thought to take me there in 15 years of marriage. But instead I nodded, gave him a small smile, and said I was just tired. He seemed to accept this, or maybe he was just relieved not to have to dig deeper, and he got dressed for bed like it was any other night. But it wasn't any other night. It was the night I started to plan my own investigation, the night I decided to find out the truth no matter how much it might hurt. Because not knowing, I realized, was worse than knowing. Living with suspicion and doubt was slowly poisoning me, turning me into someone anxious and paranoid, someone I didn't recognize. If Tom was having an affair, I needed to know. And if he wasn't, if there was some innocent explanation I couldn't see, then I needed to know that too. Either way, the uncertainty was killing me, and I was done dying slowly. I texted my best friend Claire from the bathroom, door locked, sitting on the edge of the tub in my pajamas like a teenager hiding from her parents. "Can you talk tomorrow? Something's going on with Tom, and I need advice." She responded immediately. "Come over at 10. Kids will be at school. We'll figure this out together." I stared at those words, feeling a rush of gratitude so intense it brought tears to my eyes. We'll figure this out together. I wasn't alone in this. Whatever was happening, whatever I was about to uncover, I had someone in my corner. That night, lying next to Tom in our bed, I felt the space between us like a physical thing, like a wall I could reach out and touch. He fell asleep quickly, the way he always did, his breathing evening out into the steady rhythm I'd listened to for 15 years. But I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through possibilities and scenarios, each one worse than the last. Who was she? How long had it been going on? Did he love her? Was he planning to leave me? Questions spiraled through my head until I felt dizzy with them, until I had to get up and go downstairs, sitting in the dark kitchen with a cup of tea I didn't drink, trying to calm the panic rising in my chest. This is what betrayal does to you, I was learning. It doesn't just hurt in the moment of discovery. It reaches backward, contaminating all your memories, making you question everything you thought you knew. Every time Tom had said he loved me, every kiss goodbye, every anniversary and birthday and ordinary Tuesday evening, all of it was now suspect. Had he meant any of it? Or had our entire marriage been a performance? A comfortable lie we'd both been telling until he found someone who made him want to tell the truth. When Tom came out of the bathroom that night, towel wrapped around his waist, I was sitting on the edge of our bed with a carefully neutral expression on my face, though inside I was screaming. He saw something in my eyes, a flicker of the turmoil I was trying to hide, and for just a second something passed across his face. Fear, maybe, or guilt. But then it was gone, replaced by that easy smile he'd perfected over the years, the one that made investors hand over millions and made me doubt my own instincts. He asked if I was okay, and I said I was just tired. The lie came so easily, sliding between us like it belonged there. And maybe it did. Maybe our entire marriage had become a series of small lies, each one building on the last, until we couldn't see the truth anymore, even if we wanted to. "Linda," he said the next morning over breakfast, when I casually mentioned the Le Bernardin charge I'd seen on our statement. "This is from that client dinner I told you about. Remember? The Johnsons, the couple from Connecticut looking to invest in that Tribeca property. I wanted to impress them, show them we know how to do business in style." He laughed, shaking his head like I was being silly, like the very idea that I might question him was absurd. "You know how these things are. You've got to wine and dine people if you want them to trust you with their money. The Johnsons." He'd even given them a name, built them an entire backstory in the few seconds it took him to construct the lie. I watched him spread cream cheese on his bagel, his movements casual and relaxed, and I marveled at how easily the deception flowed from him. This was a skill he'd honed, I realized. This wasn't the first time he'd lied to me. It was just the first time I was paying close enough attention to catch it. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly that I could taste it, bitter and desperate on my tongue. But I looked at that receipt again, at those 2 glasses of champagne, at that note in his handwriting. Thank you for a perfect evening. Who writes that for a business dinner? Who orders dessert and champagne when they're trying to close a deal? I opened my mouth to challenge him, to push back against the smooth lie he was selling, but the words caught in my throat. Because what if I was wrong? What if I was becoming one of those wives, paranoid and jealous, seeing affairs where there were only late nights and hard work? What if I destroyed my marriage over a receipt and a feeling I couldn't quite name? So instead of fighting, I nodded. Okay, I said softly. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have questioned you. Tom kissed the top of my head, told me he understood, that the stress of his work was affecting both of us, that we should plan a nice weekend away soon, just the 2 of us. And just like that, he'd turned it around, made me the one apologizing, the one feeling guilty for not trusting him. Made me feel like the problem in our marriage was my suspicion, not his betrayal. But trust, once cracked, doesn't heal cleanly. It scars over, lumpy and tender, ready to split open again at the slightest pressure, and I was about to apply a lot of pressure. The next morning, after Tom left for work and the kids left for school, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that went cold as I stared at nothing. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that amplifies every thought until it becomes unbearable. I'd spent the night lying next to Tom, feeling the space between us like a canyon I couldn't cross, listening to him breathe and wondering if he was dreaming about her. Because there was a her. I knew it the way you know it's going to rain before the first drop falls. The way the air changes becomes heavy with something inevitable. I just didn't have proof yet. And in a marriage, in a life you've built over 15 years, you need proof. You need something undeniable. Something that can't be explained away with a smile and a reasonable-sounding lie. The morning light filtered through the kitchen windows, illuminating dust motes floating in the air. I watched them drift, thinking about how something so small and insignificant can become visible under the right conditions, in the right light. That's what I needed to do with Tom's lies. Shine a light on them, make them visible, undeniable. The kitchen, which had always been the warm heart of our home, felt cold and empty. I could see Emma's cereal bowl still on the counter, Jake's homework scattered on the table. Evidence of our life together, our family, everything Tom was risking for someone else. I called my best friend Claire. We'd known each other since college, had been each other's maids of honor, had raised our kids alongside each other in the chaos of Brooklyn parenthood. If anyone would tell me I was crazy, it would be Claire. But when I told her everything, the canceled date, the receipt, the vague answers, and late nights, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said the words I'd been both hoping and dreading to hear. Linda, I think you need to find out the truth. Not for him. For you. Because even if you're wrong, you need to know. And if you're right, you need to know that too. She offered to help, to be my backup, my second set of eyes. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel quite so alone in that hollow house. We met at her place an hour later, sitting at her kitchen table with tea neither of us drank, while I showed her everything I'd found. The receipt, the bank notifications, the pattern of late nights and vague explanations. Claire had a legal pad out, was taking notes like we were planning a military operation. And in a way, we were. This was war, even if only one side knew we were fighting yet. Okay, Claire said, tapping her pen against the pad. First things first. We need to know if this is an ongoing thing or if it was a one-time mistake. Not that a one-time mistake is okay, she added quickly, seeing my face. But the response is different, you know? A single bad decision versus a full affair. I nodded, though the distinction felt meaningless. Whether Tom had betrayed me once or 100 times, the trust was broken. The marriage I thought I had was gone, but Claire was right that I needed to know the scope of the betrayal before I decided how to respond. I think we need to track his movements for a week or two, Claire continued. See if there's a pattern. Do you have access to his calendar? I did. We shared a family calendar app. But Tom had recently started using a separate work calendar he said was synced with his office. Convenient, I thought bitterly. What about his phone? Can you check his messages? I shook my head. Tom had always been protective of his phone, but lately it had gotten worse. He kept it face down on surfaces, took it with him into the bathroom, changed the passcode to something I didn't know, all red flags I'd been ignoring, writing off as normal privacy boundaries. Claire frowned, thinking. There are apps, she said slowly. Tracking apps. You could install one on his phone, see where he goes, who he texts. It's legal if you're married, technically, though it feels. She trailed off, and I finished the thought. Like a violation. She nodded. Yeah. But Linda, he might be violating your marriage. Don't you have a right to know? Have you ever doubted your own sanity? Have you ever felt so gaslit, so twisted around by someone else's version of reality that you couldn't trust your own eyes anymore? That's where I was. Standing in Claire's kitchen, my marriage hanging by a thread I couldn't see, wondering if I was about to destroy everything over nothing, or if I was finally waking up to the truth I'd been too scared to see. The sunlight streaming through her windows seemed too bright, too normal for the conversation we were having. Claire's kitchen smelled like the cinnamon rolls she'd made that morning, this ordinary domestic scent mixing with the extraordinary betrayal we were discussing. I don't know if I can do this, I said quietly. If I start spying on him, tracking him, going through his things, what does that make me? What does that make our marriage? Claire reached across the table and took my hand. Linda, listen to me. Your marriage is already damaged. You didn't do that. Tom did. If he's doing what you think he's doing, finding out the truth isn't betraying him. It's protecting yourself. She was right. I knew she was right. But it still felt wrong. Like I was crossing some line I couldn't uncross, becoming someone I didn't want to be. But then I thought about Tom's face when he lied to me about Le Bernardin. How easy it had been for him. How smoothly the deception had rolled off his tongue. If he could lie like that, what else had he lied about? How many other deceptions were lurking in the corners of our marriage, waiting to be discovered? Okay, I said finally. Tell me what I need to do. The investigation started small. I began paying attention to Tom's patterns, noting when he left the house and when he came back, cross-referencing his stories with the evidence I could find. I checked our credit card statements online, making a spreadsheet of every charge, every restaurant, every late-night Uber. I started setting up Google alerts for Tom's name, for his company, looking for any public information that might give me a clue. It felt dirty, this surveillance of my own husband, like I was betraying something sacred. But what about his betrayal? What about the lies I could feel accumulating between us like snow, quiet and cold and suffocating? I became two people. There was the Linda who smiled at Tom over breakfast, who packed Jake's lunch and helped Emma with her homework, who went to book club and wrote marketing copy and pretended everything was normal. And then there was the Linda who sat up late at night cross-referencing receipts and tracking phone location data, who was building a case against her own husband, who was becoming someone she'd never imagined being. The distance between these two versions of myself felt vast, unbridgeable, and I wondered which one was real. Or if maybe I'd been playing a role for so long that I didn't know who I actually was anymore. Claire suggested hiring a private investigator, but I hesitated. That felt too real, too much like admitting that my marriage was over. Plus, I didn't know how I'd explain the expense. Tom handled most of our finances, and while I had access to our accounts, A large withdrawal would trigger questions I wasn't ready to answer. So I did it myself, becoming my own detective, learning to be invisible in my own life. I'd always been the type to avoid conflict, to smooth over rough edges, to keep the peace. But grief and rage are powerful teachers, and they were teaching me to be someone I'd never been before, someone who didn't look away. I ordered a GPS tracker online, a small device advertised for tracking elderly parents with dementia. The irony wasn't lost on me. I hid it in Tom's car, tucked into a gap between the back seat and the trunk where he'd never think to look. Then I downloaded the corresponding app on my phone, watching in real time as Tom's movements traced patterns across the city. Work, client meetings, the gym, all exactly where he said he'd be. For 3 days, his location matched his stories, and I started to feel foolish. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe the Le Bernardin dinner really was business. Maybe I was destroying my marriage with suspicion based on nothing more than a feeling. But on the 4th day, everything changed. The breakthrough came 2 weeks later. On a Wednesday afternoon when Tom said he was showing properties in Long Island City. I was at my desk, supposedly working on a project for a bakery in Park Slope. But really, I was refreshing the GPS tracking app every few minutes like a woman possessed. At 2:30, the little dot representing Tom's car stopped moving in the West Village. Not Long Island City. The West Village. I stared at my phone screen, my heart hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. The GPS was clear. He was parked on a street near Washington Square Park, and he'd been there for 20 minutes. At 2:40, a charge appeared on our credit card. $73 at a wine bar called Terroir, just around the corner from where the GPS showed his car. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my keys. I should have called Claire, should have taken a moment to think this through, but I was operating on pure instinct now. If Tom was meeting someone at a wine bar in the middle of a Wednesday afternoon when he was supposed to be working, I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to know. I called an Uber, gave the driver the address, and spent the entire ride trying to breathe normally while my world tilted on its axis. The driver kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror, probably wondering if his passenger was having some kind of medical emergency. In a way, I was. My heart was racing. My palms were sweating. My vision kept going gray at the edges. This was what a panic attack felt like, I realized distantly. This was what happened when your body knew something your mind was still trying to deny. The drive from Brooklyn to Manhattan felt endless and too short at the same time. I watched familiar landmarks slide past the window, the Brooklyn Bridge, the Lower East Side, Washington Square Park, and thought about all the times Tom and I had been to the Village together. We'd gotten engaged near here, at a little Italian restaurant that probably didn't even exist anymore. We'd walked through the park on summer Sundays, eating ice cream and talking about our future. Those memories felt like they belonged to different people now, younger and more naive, people who thought love was enough. I walked into that wine bar with my shoulders back and my head up, even though inside I was screaming. It was one of those trendy places with exposed brick and mismatched furniture, the kind where young professionals go to pretend they're sophisticated. The afternoon crowd was sparse, just a few tables occupied by people working on laptops or having quiet conversations. I scanned the room, my eyes adjusting to the dim lighting, and there he was. Table in the back corner, partially hidden by a wooden partition, but I could see him clearly enough. Tom was leaning forward, his expression animated in a way I hadn't seen in months, maybe years. And across from him was a woman I didn't recognize. She was younger than me, maybe 30 at most, with long dark hair and a bright laugh that carried across the room. They weren't touching, not quite, but there was an intimacy in their body language that made my skin crawl. The way they leaned toward each other, the way she touched her neck when she laughed, the way Tom's eyes never left her face. I stood there in the doorway, frozen, unable to move forward or back. The bartender looked up, started to approach me, probably to ask if I wanted a table, But something in my face must have stopped him, because he hesitated, then went back to polishing glasses, giving me space. Time seemed to slow down, each second stretching out until I could observe every detail with painful clarity. Tom's hand on the table, his fingers drumming lightly against the wood in the way they did when he was excited about something. The woman's wine glass, half empty, lipstick marks on the rim, the way she leaned in close to say something, how Tom's face lit up when he laughed at whatever she'd said. They looked happy. They looked like they belonged together, like they were in their own private world where wives and children and 15 years of marriage didn't exist. I watched Tom reach across the table and touch her hand, just briefly, but the gesture was so familiar it made my stomach clench. That was how he used to touch me, in the early days. Those casual moments of connection that said, "You're mine, and I'm yours, and we're in this together." When had he stopped touching me like that? When had I become someone he could only be polite to, distant with, someone who shared his house but not his heart? The woman pulled her hand back, laughing, looking around as if suddenly aware they were in public. And in that moment, her eyes found mine. We locked gazes across the wine bar, and I saw recognition flicker across her face even though we'd never met. She knew who I was. She had to. The way her expression shifted from playful to guilty. The way she sat back in her chair, putting distance between herself and Tom. She knew she was the other woman, and seeing me made it real in a way it apparently hadn't been before. Tom noticed her reaction and turned to see what she was looking at. Our eyes met across the room, and I watched the blood drain from his face. For one long, terrible moment, we just stared at each other. I could see him calculating, trying to figure out what to say, what lie to tell that would explain this away. But there was no explanation that would work. We both knew it. This was the moment when everything changed, when the careful fiction of our marriage finally collapsed under the weight of the truth. I turned and walked out before he could say anything. My legs felt shaky, unreliable, but they carried me out of that wine bar and into the cold October air. I stood on the sidewalk trying to remember how to be a person, how to put one foot in front of the other, how to exist in a world where everything I thought I knew was a lie. Behind me, I heard the door open, heard Tom calling my name. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. If I stopped, if I let him talk to me, he'd find a way to twist this, to make me doubt what I'd just seen with my own eyes. And I was done doubting myself. I walked blindly down the street, no destination in mind, just moving because standing still felt impossible. My phone was buzzing in my purse, Tom calling over and over, but I didn't answer. I walked until I found myself at Washington Square Park, that same place where he'd proposed 15 years ago, and I sank onto a bench, finally letting myself fall apart. The tears came hard and fast, ugly crying that made passers-by look away in embarrassment. I didn't care. Let them see. Let the whole world see what betrayal looks like, what it does to a person when someone they trusted with everything turns out to be a stranger. A betrayal this deep doesn't heal. It scars over, becomes part of the architecture of who you are, reshaping you from the inside out. As I sat on that bench, watching people walk their dogs and students hurry to class and tourists take selfies by the fountain, I felt myself changing. The Linda who'd walked into that wine bar wasn't the same Linda who walked out. Something fundamental had shifted, some core belief about who I was and what my life meant. I'd spent 15 years building a marriage, a family, an identity as Tom's wife, and in the space of 20 minutes, I'd watched it all revealed as a fiction. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough that the afternoon light started to fade, long enough that I began to shiver in the cooling air. Eventually my phone rang again, but this time it was Claire. I answered, and before she could even ask, I said, "You were right, he's having an affair." Saying it out loud made it real in a new way, gave it a weight and permanence that made my chest ache. I'm in Washington Square Park, I said. Can you come get me? I don't think I can find my way home. That night, Tom came home at 7, and I was waiting for him in the living room. I'd had hours to compose myself, to decide what to say, and I'd chosen to say nothing. When he walked in, already talking, already launching into some explanation about how what I saw wasn't what it looked like, how that was just a colleague and they were discussing a project and yes, maybe it looked inappropriate but nothing had happened. I just held up my hand to stop him. Don't, I said quietly. Don't insult me by lying anymore. He stopped mid-sentence, his mouth still open, and I saw fear in his eyes. Good. He should be afraid. I don't want to hear your excuses tonight. I don't want to hear how I'm misunderstanding or overreacting. I saw you with her, Tom. I saw the way you looked at her, the way you touched her hand. I know. My voice was steady, surprisingly calm, and that seemed to scare him more than if I'd been screaming. Linda, please, he started, but I shook my head. Not tonight. Tonight you're going to sleep in the guest room. Tomorrow we're going to have a very long conversation about what happens next. But right now, I need you to leave me alone. He looked like he wanted to argue, to push back, but something in my face must have convinced him not to. He nodded slowly and left the room, and I sat there in the silence he left behind, trying to figure out who I was going to be now that my marriage was over. Because it was over. Even if we tried to fix it, even if he ended the affair and begged for forgiveness, the marriage I'd thought we had was gone. We might build something new from the ruins, but it would never be the same. Trust, once shattered, leaves sharp edges that cut you every time you try to pick up the pieces. That night, lying alone in our bed, I made a decision. I wasn't going to be the woman who took him back out of fear or convenience, or because it was easier than starting over. I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life wondering if he was lying to me, checking his phone and monitoring his whereabouts, living in a constant state of suspicion. I deserved better than that. My children deserved better than that. They deserve to grow up seeing that betrayal has consequences, that women don't have to accept mistreatment, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from something that's broken beyond repair. But I also wasn't going to let Tom off easy. He'd humiliated me, lied to me, made me doubt my own sanity. And he was going to face the consequences of that in full view of everyone who'd congratulated us on our perfect marriage. I was done protecting him from his own choices. I was done being the nice wife who smoothed things over and kept everything pleasant. If Tom had destroyed our marriage, then he could face the destruction publicly. He could explain to our friends and family and colleagues what he'd done, and I would make sure they all knew the truth. That was when I started planning the party. That night, I did something I'd never done before, something that felt both necessary and terrifying. I waited until I heard Tom's breathing even out in the guest room, waited until the house was completely silent, and then I got up and took his phone from where he'd left it charging in the kitchen. My hands were shaking as I tried to unlock it. He'd changed the passcode recently, one more red flag I'd noted and ignored. But I knew Tom. He wasn't creative with passwords. I tried our anniversary. No. Jake's birthday. No. Emma's birthday. No. And then, almost on instinct, I tried Arrow 828. The birthday Tom had told me was his mother's, though I'd always suspected he got the date wrong because we'd never celebrated it on that day. The phone unlocked. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. This was it. This was the line between suspicion and proof, between wondering and knowing. I opened his messages, and there it was. A thread labeled simply M that made my stomach drop. I started scrolling, reading messages that confirmed everything and shattered me all over again at the same time. Missing you already. When can I see you again? Last night was perfect. You make me feel alive in a way I haven't felt in years. I can't stop thinking about you. This probably makes me a terrible person, but I don't care anymore. I sat there on my kitchen floor at 2 in the morning, Tom's phone illuminated in my hand, reading message after message that detailed a whole secret life I'd known nothing about. They'd been seeing each other for 4 months, I learned. 4 months of lies, of him telling me he loved me while planning secret meetings with her. The messages were intimate but careful, never explicitly sexual, but full of inside jokes and pet names and plans to meet at hotels and restaurants across Manhattan. They called each other M and T, like they were teenagers hiding from their parents instead of adults destroying a family. I forced myself to keep reading even though each word felt like swallowing glass. I needed to see all of it, needed to understand the full scope of the betrayal. Her name was Melissa. I learned from scrolling back through older messages. She worked as a marketing coordinator at one of the firms Tom's company partnered with. They'd met at a conference in June, had coffee afterward, had started texting. Just as friends, one of Tom's early messages said, "I can talk to you in a way I can't talk to anyone else." That was how it always started, wasn't it? Just friends, just talking, just innocent connection that gradually became something more, until suddenly you're sneaking around and lying and justifying it by saying, your wife doesn't understand you. The worst part wasn't even the romantic messages, though those were bad enough. It was the ones where Tom complained about me, about our marriage, painting me as some kind of cold, distant wife who didn't appreciate him. "She's so focused on the kids, she barely sees me anymore," he'd written. "Sometimes I feel like I'm just a paycheck to her, not a person." Reading that made me want to scream. I was focused on the kids because someone had to be, because Tom was barely home, because I was trying to hold our family together while he was apparently falling apart. And now he was using my attempts to keep our life running smoothly as justification for his affair? The revisionist history, the way he was rewriting our marriage to cast himself as the victim and me as the villain, it was breathtaking in its dishonesty. I took screenshots of everything, my fingers moving automatically even though my mind felt numb. I backed them up to a cloud account Tom didn't know about, organizing them by date, building my case like a lawyer preparing for trial. Part of me couldn't believe I was doing this, that I was being so calculating, so cold. But another part of me, the part that had been growing stronger over these weeks of investigation, knew this was necessary. If I confronted Tom with just what I'd seen in the wine bar, he'd find a way to minimize it, to claim it was just a flirtation that hadn't gone anywhere, to promise it would never happen again. But with these messages, with proof of 4 months of lies and secret meetings and him bad-mouthing me to his mistress, he couldn't talk his way out. The evidence was undeniable. By the time I finished documenting everything and returned his phone to the kitchen counter where I'd found it, the sky was starting to lighten with dawn. I hadn't slept at all, but I felt strangely alert, wired on adrenaline and rage and something else I couldn't quite name. Purpose, maybe. For weeks I'd been floundering, lost in uncertainty and self-doubt. But now I knew the truth, and the truth gave me clarity. My marriage was over. The only question now was how to end it in a way that made Tom face the consequences of his choices. I called Claire before the sun was fully up, waking her despite the early hour. "I'm ready," I said when she answered, her voice groggy with sleep. "I'm ready to fight back." And over coffee at her kitchen table an hour later, while Tom was still sleeping and the kids were still in bed, Claire and I began to plan my revenge. Claire wanted me to confront him immediately, to kick him out, to burn his clothes in the driveway like women do in movies. But I'd spent 15 years being the peacemaker, the one who smoothed things over, and even now, even knowing what I knew, some part of me wanted to handle this right. Or maybe I just wanted revenge. Maybe I'd watched too many true crime documentaries and read too many stories about women who fought back, who refused to be victims, who turned the tables on the men who betrayed them. Either way, I wasn't ready for a private confrontation where Tom could manipulate me, could make me doubt myself again, could talk his way into forgiveness with promises and tears. I wanted witnesses. I wanted everyone to know what he'd done, I wanted him to feel even a fraction of the humiliation I felt every time I looked at him and saw the lie he'd become. "What if we expose him publicly?" I said slowly, the idea forming even as I spoke it. "What if we make sure everyone knows what he did?" Claire looked at me with something like admiration. "I like the way you're thinking, but how?" And that's when it came to me. Our 15th anniversary was coming up in 3 weeks. Tom's mother had been pushing for a party, something to celebrate, to show everyone that the Morrisons were still the success story they'd always been. What if we gave her that party? What if we invited everyone we knew, everyone who mattered in our lives, and then showed them exactly what kind of man Tom really was? "That's brutal," Claire said when I finished explaining my idea. She was quiet for a moment, thinking it through, and then she smiled. "I love it. When do we start planning?" The universe gave me the perfect opportunity. Our 15th wedding anniversary was coming up in 3 weeks, on November 12th. Tom's mother had been pushing for us to have a party, something to celebrate, to remind everyone that the Morrisons were still the success story they'd always been. Tom had resisted at first, claiming he was too busy, but I'd encouraged it, playing the dutiful wife who wanted to mark this milestone. "I think it would be nice," I'd said over dinner one night, my voice sweet and accommodating. 15 years is a big deal, and your mother is right. We should celebrate what we've built together." Tom had looked surprised, but pleased, probably relieved that I seemed to be moving past my suspicions from catching him at the wine bar. I'd played it perfectly over the past week, accepting his explanations about Melissa being just a colleague, letting him think I believed his lies. Let him think I was that naive, that trusting. It would make the reveal even more devastating. We booked a rooftop venue in Brooklyn Heights with a view of the Manhattan skyline, invited friends and family, hired a caterer. Tom thought it was my way of recommitting to our marriage, of pushing past the distance that had grown between us. He had no idea it was going to be his public execution. "This is really nice of you," he said one evening as we went over the guest list. "I know things have been difficult lately, and I'm sorry for that. But this party, it feels like a fresh start for us." He smiled at me, reached for my hand across the table, and I let him take it even though touching him made my skin crawl. "I love you, Linda. I know I don't say it enough, but I do." The lie rolled off his tongue so easily, and I wondered how many times he'd said those same words to Melissa. "I love you too," I said, returning the lie, and inside I was already planning his destruction. Planning that party while pretending everything was fine was the hardest thing I'd ever done. I had to smile at Tom across the dinner table while knowing he'd been with her that afternoon, the GPS tracker in his car showing me exactly where he'd been even as he lied about client meetings and site visits. I had to discuss the menu with the caterer while my hands shook with rage, choosing food for a celebration that was really going to be a funeral for our marriage. I had to reassure Emma that everything was okay when she asked why I seemed sad, telling her it was just work stress, just the usual middle-aged stuff she wouldn't understand for years. And at night, lying next to Tom in our bed, he'd moved back into our bedroom after a few days, and I'd let him, not wanting to raise suspicions. I had to pretend to sleep while my mind raced through every detail of my plan, checking and rechecking, making sure I hadn't missed anything. The psychological toll was immense. I was living 2 lives simultaneously, and the space between them was crushing me. I started having panic attacks in the grocery store, my heart racing as I picked out appetizers for a party where I was planning to destroy my husband's reputation. I'd lose entire hours scrolling through those screenshots I'd taken, torture reading every sweet nothing he'd sent to Melissa, every promise he'd made while promising me the same things. I stopped eating regularly, lost weight I didn't need to lose, developed dark circles under my eyes that I covered with makeup. Claire started coming over during the day just to make sure I was okay, to remind me that I wasn't crazy, that what I was planning was justified. "Are you sure about this?" she asked one afternoon. watching me work on the slideshow I was preparing for the party. I'd borrowed a projector from a friend, told Tom I wanted to show photos from our 15 years together as a surprise for the guests. He'd thought it was a sweet idea, had even helped me pick out some of his favorite photos from our early years, back when we were happy, or at least when I thought we were. Those photos were going into the slideshow, along with some other images that would be much less pleasant for him to see. "I'm sure," I told Claire. "He deserves this. They all deserve to know what he really is." There was a close call in late October that nearly derailed everything. Tom came home early one afternoon, something he never did, and I was at my desk with screenshots of his text messages spread across my laptop screen, working on the slideshow. I heard his key in the door and had maybe 10 seconds to close everything, to compose myself, to pretend I'd been working on a client project. My heart was hammering so hard I thought he'd hear it from across the room. He came into my office, loosening his tie, smiling in a way that might have seemed warm if I didn't know what I knew. "Hey," he said. "Thought I'd come home early. Maybe we could grab an early dinner before picking up the kids? The Italian place you like?" It was a peace offering, I realized, his way of showing me he was trying, that he wanted to fix whatever he'd broken. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so painful. "Sure," I said, my voice surprisingly steady even though inside I was screaming. "Let me just save my work." As I closed my laptop, as I smiled at my husband who'd been betraying me for months, I felt something shift inside me. The last piece of love I'd been holding on to, the small hope that maybe we could somehow work through this, it just evaporated. What replaced it was cold, clear focus. He was going to pay for what he'd done, and he was going to pay publicly. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and followed him out to dinner. And all through the meal, as he talked about his day and asked about mine, as he ordered my favorite wine and held my hand across the table, I smiled and nodded and played the role of loving wife while planning his destruction. We went to that Italian place in Park Slope, the one with the red check tablecloths and the owner who always remembered our names. "The Morrisons!" Marco exclaimed when we walked in, showing us to our usual table by the window. "So good to see you both. It's been too long." Tom ordered wine, a nice Chianti that we'd always shared here. And for a moment I let myself remember what it was like when things were good between us. Or when I thought they were good. Had it ever been real? Or had I been living in a fantasy this whole time, seeing what I wanted to see instead of what was actually there? "You seem different lately," Tom said, studying me across the table. "Calmer, maybe. More like yourself." I almost laughed. If only he knew. I wasn't calmer. I was focused. I wasn't more like myself. I was becoming someone entirely new, someone forged in the fire of his betrayal. "I've been trying to let go of stress," I said carefully. "Life's too short to worry about things I can't control." He nodded, looking relieved. "That's good. That's really good. I know I've been distracted with work, and I'm sorry. But I'm going to try to be more present. Starting now." He raised his glass in a toast. "To us, to 15 years and 15 more." I clinked my glass against his, the sound sharp in the warm restaurant air. "To truth," I said quietly, and he smiled, not understanding, not seeing the blade hidden in my words. We ate our pasta and talked about the kids and the upcoming party. And the whole time I was thinking about the slideshow on my laptop at home, about the moment when Tom would see those screenshots projected on a screen in front of everyone we knew, about the look on his face when he realized what I'd done. The anticipation was almost sweet, a dark counterpoint to the anger that had been burning in me for weeks. The week before the party, Tom was almost giddy with excitement. He kept talking about how nice it was that we were doing this, how it felt like we were reconnecting, how maybe this was the turning point our marriage needed. The GPS tracker I'd hidden in his car told a different story. While he was telling me we were growing closer, he was still meeting Melissa twice a week, still sending her messages late at night, still living his double life and apparently feeling no guilt about it whatsoever. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. How did he do it? How did he look me in the eye and talk about reconnecting while planning his next secret rendezvous with his mistress? He even bought me a necklace, white gold with a small diamond pendant, and presented it to me over dinner at home one evening like he was husband of the year. "I saw this and thought of you," he said, fastening it around my neck while the kids watched and smiled, happy to see their parents being affectionate. "For putting up with me and for organizing this party. I know I haven't been easy to live with lately." The necklace was beautiful. The kind of thing I would have loved a few months ago before I knew what I knew. Now it just felt like guilt. Or maybe insurance. Something he could point to later and say, "See? I tried. I bought her jewelry. I took her to dinner. I was a good husband. I wore that necklace every day leading up to the party, letting it sit heavy against my collarbone, a constant reminder of his betrayal disguised as love. Every time I felt it there, I thought about Melissa's hands on him, about their secret meetings, about the 4 months of lies. And my resolve hardened further. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice, about refusing to let Tom rewrite history and make me the villain in a story where he was the one who'd broken everything. It was about taking back control of the narrative of my own life. Claire and I had coordinated everything down to the last detail. She'd be at the party early, helping me set up, making sure the AV equipment worked. Because yes, there was going to be AV equipment. I'd had a friend from college, a graphic designer named Marcus, who owed me a favor: create a slideshow for me. The brief I'd given him was simple. Start sweet, end with the truth. He'd asked very few questions, just looked at the materials I provided and said he'd make something that would have the impact I wanted. When he sent me the finished product, I watched it alone in my office, door locked, and I cried. Not from sadness, but from the sheer cathartic power of seeing the truth laid out so starkly, so undeniably. The slideshow would start exactly as expected. Photos from our wedding, Tom and me young and hopeful, surrounded by family and friends. Photos of Emma as a baby, then Jake, our family growing. Vacations to the Jersey Shore, Christmases with Tom's parents, Emma's first day of school. 15 years of life together compressed into 3 minutes of nostalgia. The music would be At Last by Etta James, the song we'd danced to at our wedding, sentimental and sweet. And then, just when everyone was getting misty-eyed and congratulating us on our lasting love, the music would change. It would get discordant, jarring, and the photos would change too. Screenshots of Tom's messages to Melissa would appear on the screen, blown up large enough for everyone to read. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Been thinking about you all day. You make me feel alive again, something I haven't felt in years. Last night was perfect, she'll never know." Each message more damning than the last, each one a hammer blow to the illusion of our happy marriage. And interspersed with the screenshots would be photos. Tom and Melissa at restaurants, gleaned from her social media before she'd made it private. The receipt from Le Bernardin with Tom's handwriting at the bottom. A timeline showing all the times Tom had told me he was working late or meeting clients, matched with GPS data showing him at hotels and restaurants across Manhattan. The final slide would simply ask, "Was our marriage a lie?" And then the screen would go dark, and I would turn to face Tom and everyone we knew, and I would tell them the truth. That my husband had been having an affair for months. That he'd been lying to me, to our children, to all of them. That the marriage they'd been celebrating wasn't real, had maybe never been real. And Tom would have to stand there and face it all, unable to hide. Unable to spin it, unable to do anything but accept the consequences of his choices. "It's brutal," Marcus had said when he showed me the finished slideshow. "Are you sure this is how you want to do this?" I'd looked at him, this old friend who'd seen me through college heartbreaks and career disappointments and the stress of new motherhood, and I'd nodded. "I'm sure. He destroyed our marriage in private. He can face the consequences in public. The night before the party, I barely slept. I kept running through scenarios in my head, imagining Tom's face when he realized what was happening, imagining the gasps from our guests, imagining the aftermath. Part of me wanted to call it off, to cancel the whole thing, to file for divorce quietly and spare everyone the spectacle. But another part of me, the part that had been growing stronger over these weeks, the part that was done being nice and understanding and accommodating, that part wanted this, needed this, because staying silent about betrayal doesn't protect you, it protects the person who betrayed you, and I was done protecting Tom. I got out of bed around 3 a.m, unable to lie still anymore, and went downstairs to the kitchen. The house was dark and quiet, everyone else asleep, and I stood at the window looking out at our backyard, at the swing set Tom had built for the kids years ago, at the garden I'd planted last spring. This was my home, my life, and Tom had been willing to throw it all away for someone else. The anger that thought sparked was clean and pure, burning away any remaining doubt about what I was about to do. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow everyone would know the truth. And then, finally, I could start rebuilding my life from the ruins Tom had created. November 12th arrived with clear skies and a cold wind blowing off the East River. The party was scheduled for 7 p.m., and I spent the day getting ready with a calmness that surprised me. I'd expected to be nervous, shaking, second-guessing, but instead I felt clear-headed, focused, like an athlete before a competition. This was it. This was the moment I'd been planning for, and I was ready. I chose my outfit carefully. A black dress that was elegant but not flashy, the kind of thing you'd wear to a funeral rather than a celebration. Though I doubted anyone would notice the symbolism until later. Simple jewelry. Just the necklace Tom had given me, because the irony was too perfect to resist. Minimal makeup. My hair in a simple style. I wanted to look like myself, not like someone playing a part. I wanted to look like a woman who was telling the truth, not like a scorned wife out for revenge, even though I was absolutely both of those things. Emma came into my bedroom as I was getting dressed, perching on the edge of the bed and watching me with those sharp 14-year-old eyes that missed nothing. "You look pretty, Mom," she said. "But sad. Are you sad?" I looked at my daughter in the mirror, this beautiful young woman who was on the verge of understanding adult complications, and I chose my words carefully. "Not sad," I said. "Just serious. 15 years is a long time, and I'm thinking about everything that's happened." She nodded, like that made sense, but I could see the worry in her eyes. She knew something was off, even if she couldn't articulate what. "Emma," I said, turning to face her, "I want you to know that your father and I love you and Jake very much. No matter what happens, that will never change." She frowned. "Why are you talking like that? Is something wrong?" I smiled, trying to reassure her even though inside I was breaking. "Everything's fine, sweetie. Just feeling emotional today. Anniversary stuff." She seemed to accept this, gave me a hug, and left to finish getting ready herself. I sat down on the bed for a moment after she left, letting myself feel the weight of what I was about to do. This wasn't just about Tom and me. This was about Emma and Jake too, about showing them that actions have consequences, that betrayal isn't acceptable even when it comes from someone you love. I was doing this for them as much as for myself. Tom and I arrived at the venue at 6:30. The space was beautiful, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline, the buildings lit up against the darkening sky like jewels on black velvet, round tables with white linens, a bar in the corner glowing with amber light, a small stage area where the slideshow would play. Tom kept his hand on my lower back as we walked in, playing the devoted husband, and I let him. Just a little longer, I thought. Just another hour of pretending. Claire was already there, helping the caterers arrange food on tables, and when she caught my eye, she gave me a small nod. Everything was ready. The laptop was connected to the projector, hidden behind the stage curtain. The slideshow was loaded and tested. All I had to do was wait for the right moment and press play. Guests started arriving at 7. Tom's parents came first, his mother immediately tearing up and pulling us both into hugs. 15 years, she kept saying. I'm so proud of you both. You're proof that true love exists. I smiled and thanked her, feeling like a fraud and a truth teller at the same time. Because yes, I had loved Tom. For 15 years, I'd loved him with everything I had. But love isn't enough when it's built on lies. And tonight, his mother and everyone else was going to see just how much of our marriage had been fiction. More people arrived. Tom's brother and sister-in-law, our neighbors from the block, friends from college, colleagues from Tom's office. About 60 people total, everyone who mattered in our lives. They hugged us, congratulated us, commented on how lucky we were to have found each other. Some of Tom's business partners made jokes about him being one of the good ones, who didn't trade in his wife for a younger model. Tom laughed along with them, squeezed my hand, played his part perfectly. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed it too. He was that good at lying, at presenting the face people wanted to see. I circulated through the room, accepting congratulations, making small talk, all while watching the clock and waiting for the right moment. I saw Rebecca Chen arrive, the divorce lawyer I'd been consulting with, the one who knew exactly what was about to happen and had advised me on the legal implications. She gave me a discreet nod of support. I saw Marcus, the designer who'd created the slideshow, nursing a drink in the corner and looking nervous on my behalf. I saw Claire keeping an eye on the technical setup, making sure nothing would go wrong when it was time. Everyone was in place. All that was left was for me to push the button and watch my marriage explode. At 8 o'clock, after everyone had arrived and had a few drinks, after the room was warm with conversation and laughter, I asked for everyone's attention. The room quieted down gradually, faces turning toward me expectantly. I stood in front of the screen where the slideshow would play, Tom beside me looking proud and slightly confused. I'd told him I was going to say a few words and show some photos, nothing more. He had no idea what was coming. Thank you all for being here tonight, I said, my voice clear and steady, even though my heart was pounding. Tom and I are so grateful to have you in our lives, to celebrate this milestone with people we love. 15 years is a long time, and it's been full of ups and downs, joys and challenges. I paused, looking around the room at all these familiar faces. Tom's mother was already dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. I've put together a look back at our 15 years together, a journey through our marriage from beginning to... I let the pause hang there for a moment. To tonight. Tom, this is for you. I pressed play, and the slideshow began. The first images were exactly as planned. Our wedding day, Tom and I cutting our cake while our guests cheered. Tom's face when he saw me walking down the aisle, full of love and hope. Our first dance, wrapped in each other's arms like we were the only two people in the world. The music swelled, at last, filling the room, and I heard people sigh contentedly. This was what they'd come for, this celebration of lasting love, this proof that happily ever after was possible. Photos of Emma as a baby appeared on screen, tiny and perfect, Tom holding her with an expression of wonder. Then Jake, our son who completed our family. Birthday parties and Christmas mornings and lazy Sunday afternoons. A photo of all four of us at the beach, building sandcastles and laughing. We looked happy. We looked like the perfect family. And maybe, for a while, we were. Or maybe I'd just been really good at not seeing the cracks. The room was silent except for the music and the occasional sniffle from someone getting emotional. I glanced at Tom, standing beside me, his eyes on the screen, a small smile on his face as he watched our life unfold in photographs. He had no idea what was coming. None of them did. In about 30 seconds, everything would change. And then the music shifted. At last, cut off abruptly, replaced by something discordant and jarring, a sound that made people wince and look confused. The sweet family photos disappeared, and the first screenshot appeared on the screen, 8 feet tall and impossible to miss. A text from Tom to Melissa, dated 3 months ago. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Been thinking about you all day." The room went silent. I heard someone gasp, a sharp intake of breath that seemed loud in the sudden quiet. Tom's hand went rigid in mine, his whole body tensing as he processed what he was seeing. But the slideshow didn't stop. Another screenshot appeared. "You make me feel alive again." Something I haven't felt in years. More gasps now, people starting to look at Tom, then at me, trying to understand what was happening, whether this was some kind of joke. "Linda," Tom said beside me, his voice low and urgent. "What is this? What are you doing?" But I didn't answer, just kept my eyes on the screen as more screenshots appeared, each one more damning than the last. Messages about secret meetings, about hotels in Manhattan, about how Melissa made him feel like himself again, how being with her was easy in a way his marriage hadn't been in years. Photos appeared too. Tom and Melissa at restaurants I'd pulled from her social media, the two of them smiling at each other over wine glasses, their body language intimate and unmistakable. The receipt from Le Bernardin appeared, Tom's handwriting large enough for everyone to read. "Thank you for a perfect evening." A timeline showed up next, dates on one side showing Tom's excuses to me, working late, client meetings, business trips, matched with GPS data showing his actual locations, hotels, Melissa's apartment, romantic restaurants across the city. 4 months of lies laid out in chronological order, undeniable and devastating. Tom's mother made a sound like a wounded animal. Someone else said, "Oh my God," loud enough to carry across the room. People were starting to murmur now, a low buzz of shock and confusion spreading through the crowd. Tom had let go of my hand and was staring at the screen, his face gone white, then red, his mouth opening and closing but no words coming out. The final slide appeared. Was our marriage a lie? In stark white letters against a black background. The question hung there for a long moment, and then the screen went dark. The room was absolutely silent now, 60 people frozen in place, all of them staring at either the blank screen, or Tom, or me. This was it. This was the moment when everything changed, when the lie became truth, when my marriage ended in front of everyone we knew. I turned to face Tom, pulling my hand from his. When I spoke, my voice was steady and clear, carrying across the silent room. "You forgot our date," I said. "You called me 2 hours before our anniversary dinner and said you forgot because of a work emergency. But you didn't forget. You just had different plans. With her." I gestured at the dark screen. "I saw you at the restaurant that night, Tom. I stood in the doorway and watched you with her, and I knew everything you'd told me was a lie." Tom tried to speak, his face a mask of horror and panic. "Linda, please, this isn't— you don't understand." But I held up a hand to stop him. "No, don't insult everyone here by lying anymore. We all just saw the evidence. 4 months of lies. 4 months of you telling me you loved me while planning secret meetings with her. 4 months of you complaining about our marriage to your mistress while pretending everything was fine at home." My voice was getting stronger now, fueled by months of suppressed rage finally finding release. "I wasn't your wife, Tom. I was your fool, and everyone here needs to know what kind of man you really are." I turned to address the room, to face all these people who'd come to celebrate a marriage that had been dead for months. "I'm sorry you all came here expecting a celebration. But I couldn't stand up here and lie to you, the way Tom has been lying to me, to our children, to all of you. You deserve to know the truth. Our marriage wasn't what you thought it was. It wasn't what I thought it was. And I'm done pretending otherwise." Tom's mother was crying openly now, her face crumpling as she looked between Tom and me, trying to process what was happening. Tom's father stood rigid, his jaw clenched, staring at his son with something like disgust. Our friends and neighbors and colleagues stood frozen in various stages of shock, some looking sympathetic, others looking uncomfortable, a few looking almost eager for more details. This was going to be the gossip story of the decade in our social circle, I realized distantly. The Morrison anniversary party where Linda exposed Tom's affair in front of 60 people. They'd be talking about this for years. "Linda, please," Tom said again, reaching for me, but I stepped back. "We need to talk about this privately, not here, not like this." I shook my head. "You lost the right to privacy when you decided to destroy our marriage. You did this, Tom. You made the choice to lie, to cheat, to throw away 15 years for someone else. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth." Then I walked off that stage and out of that venue, Claire immediately falling in step beside me, her hand on my arm steady and grounding. Behind us, I could hear chaos erupting. Tom calling my name, his voice desperate now, his mother sobbing. People talking all at once, voices rising in shock and speculation. But I didn't look back. I kept walking, out of that beautiful rooftop space with its view of the Manhattan skyline, down the elevator, out into the cold November night. And when we reached the street, when the cold air hit my face, I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for months. "You did it," Claire said beside me, her voice full of something like awe. "Holy shit, Linda, you actually did it." I nodded, suddenly shaking, the adrenaline that had been holding me together starting to drain away. "I did it," I repeated, and then I started laughing. Or maybe crying. It was hard to tell the difference anymore. Claire flagged down a cab and we got in, leaving the wreckage of my marriage behind us, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Free. The aftermath was brutal and swift. Within hours, the slideshow had been shared across social media by someone who'd recorded it on their phone. By midnight, I had hundreds of texts and calls, people I hadn't spoken to in years reaching out with a mixture of support, curiosity, and judgment. I'd become infamous overnight, the scorned wife who'd exposed her husband's affair at their anniversary party. Some people thought I was a hero, someone who'd finally stood up and refused to be victimized quietly. Others thought I was vindictive, cruel, that I'd gone too far, that private matters should stay private. But I didn't care. For the first time in months, maybe years, I didn't care what anyone else thought. I'd told the truth, and the truth doesn't need permission to exist. Tom tried to call me that night, leaving voicemail after voicemail, his voice moving from angry to desperate to pleading. He wanted to explain, he said. It wasn't what I thought. He'd made a mistake, but he loved me. He loved our family. Couldn't we talk about this? Couldn't we work this out? I listened to exactly one of those messages before blocking his number, because there was nothing left to talk about. Some betrayals are too deep for conversation, too fundamental for forgiveness. He'd made his choices. Now he could live with them. I'd arranged for Emma and Jake to stay with Claire's sister that night, not wanting them to witness the immediate fallout. But the next morning, I had to face them and explain what had happened. It was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had. Watching my children process the fact that their father had betrayed our family, that the life they'd known was fundamentally different than they'd thought. Emma, my smart, perceptive daughter, didn't seem as surprised as I'd feared. "I knew something was wrong," she said quietly. "I didn't know what, but I knew Dad was lying about something." Jake took it harder, retreating into angry silence, refusing to talk to Tom when he called. I held them both, let them cry, let them rage, and promised them that we'd get through this together, that we were still a family even if the shape of it was changing. Tom's business suffered immediate consequences. Several of his biggest investors pulled out within days, not wanting to be associated with the scandal. His partners at the firm called an emergency meeting and strongly suggested he step back from day-to-day operations until the situation blew over, which was corporate speak for, "You're an embarrassment and you're costing us money." Two of his junior partners left to start their own company, taking several clients with them. The man who'd built his reputation on trust and relationships had destroyed both in a single night, and the business world he'd operated in for 15 years suddenly turned its back on him. Everyone who'd enabled Tom's deception, his secretary who'd helped schedule his meetings with Melissa, the colleagues who'd covered for him, the friends who'd known or suspected and said nothing, they all faced their own version of consequences. And I felt exactly zero sympathy. Melissa, for her part, disappeared from social media entirely, and, according to my sources, quietly left the city within 2 weeks. I never contacted her directly, never confronted her because she wasn't the real problem. Tom was the problem. He was the one who'd made vows to me. He was the one who'd looked me in the eye every day and lied. Melissa was just the woman who'd believed those lies, who'd thought she was special when really she was just convenient. But the firm she worked for quietly let her go a month later, not wanting the association with the scandal. In the ecosystem of infidelity, everyone pays the price eventually. The divorce was finalized by February, just 3 months after the party. Rebecca Chen, my lawyer, was brilliant and ruthless, using the evidence I'd gathered to negotiate a settlement that left me financially secure for years. I got the brownstone, primary custody of Emma and Jake, child support, spousal maintenance, and a significant portion of Tom's assets. The court agreed that his adultery and deception warranted a fault-based divorce, and the judge, a woman in her 60s who'd clearly seen this story play out too many times, didn't seem particularly sympathetic to Tom's protests that I'd humiliated him publicly. "You humiliated yourself, Mr. Morrison," she said dryly. "Mrs. Morrison simply made your actions visible. Truth is an absolute defense." Rebecca had done her homework, presenting not just the affair evidence, but also documentation of how Tom had been hiding money, preparing to leave me with as little as possible when he finally worked up the courage to end things on his terms. Apparently, my public revelation had accelerated his timeline and ruined his financial strategy. That gave me a grim sort of satisfaction. He'd been planning to abandon me and the kids anyway, probably after securing Melissa, after making sure all his assets were protected. I'd just beaten him to it. Tom tried to see me once after the divorce was final, showing up at the brownstone on a Saturday afternoon when he knew the kids were at a soccer tournament. I opened the door to find him standing there, looking smaller somehow, diminished in a way that went beyond just physical appearance. He wanted to apologize, he said, to explain, to see if there was any chance, any possibility, that we could work things out. For the kids, he said. For everything we'd built together. I looked at this man I'd spent 15 years with, this stranger wearing my husband's face, and I felt nothing. Not love, not hate, not even anger anymore. Just a profound sense of relief that I'd never have to trust him again, never have to wonder if he was lying, never have to diminish myself to fit into his narrative. "No," I said simply. "There's no chance. What we had is over. It's been over for months, maybe years. I just didn't know it until you forced me to see it." "I'm sorry," he said, and maybe he even meant it. "I never wanted to hurt you. I felt trapped, and Melissa made me feel free, and I didn't know how to—" I held up a hand, cutting him off. "Tom, I don't care. I don't care how you felt or what you thought you needed or how you justified it to yourself. You destroyed our marriage. You lied to our children. And now you get to live with the consequences. That's it. That's all there is." And then I closed the door, leaving him standing on my porch with his apologies and excuses, and I walked back into my house. My house now, not ours. My life, not ours. And it felt like the first honest breath I'd taken in years. By spring, I'd started rebuilding my life in earnest. I threw myself into my writing, taking on bigger projects, pitching essays to magazines about betrayal and resilience and the complexity of modern marriage. To my surprise, editors were interested. My story had resonated with people, women especially, and they wanted to hear more. I started a blog called After the Lie, writing about my experience, about the process of healing, about what it means to reconstruct your identity after it's been shattered by someone you trusted. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of women reached out, sharing their own stories of betrayal and survival, thanking me for being honest, for showing them that it was okay to be angry, that they didn't have to forgive to move forward, that sometimes burning it all down is the only way to build something real from the ashes. I'd become an accidental spokesperson for a certain kind of rage, for women who were done being understanding and accommodating and nice. And while it was terrifying to be so public, to have my story dissected and discussed by strangers, it was also freeing. I wasn't hiding anymore. I wasn't pretending. I was just living my truth, messy and complicated and angry as it was. Emma and Jake adjusted slowly but surely. Emma, ever the pragmatist, seemed almost relieved that the pretense was over, that we could stop acting like everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. She spent more time at home, helping me cook dinner, talking about her day, opening up in ways she hadn't in years. She started writing too, journaling about her feelings, and when she showed me some of her entries, raw and honest and heartbreaking, I was so proud of her courage I could barely speak. Jake took longer, cycling through anger and sadness and confusion. He had trouble at school for a while, getting into fights, his grades slipping. But we found a family therapist, Dr. Sarah Williams, who was patient and kind and didn't try to rush any of us through our grief. Gradually, as the months passed and our new normal established itself, Jake started to relax. We found new routines, new traditions that were ours alone, not built on Tom's lies. Friday movie nights with pizza, Sunday morning breakfasts that Jake helped make. Little moments of connection that slowly rebuilt the trust and security that had been shattered. I moved us to a different neighborhood that summer, leaving the brownstone with its too many memories for a bright apartment in Carroll Gardens with a small garden out back. It wasn't as big or impressive, but it was ours, free from the ghosts of my old marriage. I painted the walls bright colors that Tom would have hated, hung art I'd always loved but he'd thought was too bold. I bought furniture that was comfortable instead of impressive, that reflected my taste instead of his. And slowly, room by room, I built a space that felt like home in a way the brownstone never had, at least not toward the end. I started dating again, too, cautiously, taking things slow, learning to trust my instincts after years of doubting them. Most of the dates didn't go anywhere, and that was okay. I wasn't looking for someone to complete me or fix me or fill the space Tom had left. I'd spent 15 years being half of a couple, and now I was learning to be whole on my own. Some nights I felt lonely. Some nights I missed having someone to share dinner with, to laugh with, to talk through the mundane details of my day. But loneliness, I was learning, was different from the hollow isolation I'd felt in my marriage toward the end. At least now I was lonely as myself, not as some diminished version I'd become to accommodate Tom's lies. By summer, almost 9 months after that party, I felt like a different person, stronger, clearer, more myself than I'd been in years. The woman who'd stood frozen in that restaurant doorway, watching her husband betray her, she was gone. In her place was someone who'd walked through fire and come out transformed. Not unscathed, I had scars, psychological and emotional, that would probably never fully heal, but changed in ways that mattered. I'd learned that you can love someone completely and still need to leave them. That staying in a marriage that's killing you isn't noble, it's just slow suicide. That revenge, when it's really about justice, about refusing to let someone rewrite history and gaslight you into doubting yourself, can be a form of self-preservation. I published my first major essay in a national magazine that July, titled The Anatomy of Betrayal: What We Don't Talk About When We Talk About Infidelity. It went viral, sparking conversations about modern marriage, about emotional labor, about the ways women are expected to forgive while men are expected to stray. I got offers for speaking engagements, for podcast interviews, for a potential book deal. My private pain had somehow become public catharsis, and while part of me resented the exposure, another part was grateful. If my story could help even one woman find the courage to leave a situation that was hurting her, then maybe all of it, the investigation, the party, the public humiliation, had been worth it. Tom's life, meanwhile, had not recovered as smoothly. His business was struggling. His reputation damaged beyond repair in certain circles. He'd moved to a small apartment in Queens, seeing Emma and Jake every other weekend in visits that started tense and gradually became more comfortable, though they'd never be what they were before. He'd dated briefly after the divorce, but apparently those relationships hadn't worked out. Claire, who kept tabs on him through mutual friends, reported that he seemed genuinely remorseful, that the consequences of his actions had finally hit him in a way that changed him. But that wasn't my problem anymore. He'd made his choices, and he got to live with the aftermath. My only concern was making sure Emma and Jake maintained a relationship with their father, flawed as he was, because they deserved that chance even if I was done giving Tom second chances. Looking back now, almost a year after that party, people still ask me if I regret the way I handled it, if I wish I'd done it differently, more privately, with less spectacle. And my answer is always the same: no, not even for a second. Because that party, that public revelation, it wasn't just about punishing Tom. It was about refusing to be complicit in his lie. It was about taking back the narrative of my own life. For 15 years, I'd let him control the story, let him define what our marriage was. That night, I took control back. And yes, it was messy and dramatic and painful for everyone involved. But the truth usually is, the question isn't whether the truth hurts. It's whether the lie hurts more. And I can tell you from experience, the lie hurts more. The lie kills you slowly, turns you into someone you don't recognize, makes you doubt your own reality. The truth might hurt, but it also sets you free. Now, I want to share something important with you, something I learned through all of this, something that might help you if you're going through something similar. What I experienced wasn't just infidelity. It was a pattern of manipulation and gaslighting that left me doubting my own reality for months. When I found that first receipt, and Tom explained it away so smoothly, making me feel foolish for questioning him, that was textbook gaslighting. When he canceled our plans last minute repeatedly, always with reasonable explanations that made me feel selfish for being disappointed, that was emotional manipulation. And when he used his work and our family's financial security as justification for behaviors that made me uncomfortable, that was a form of coercive control. Here's what I wish someone had told me earlier. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, if your gut is telling you that the story doesn't add up, don't ignore that feeling. Don't talk yourself out of your own intuition the way I did for months. I spent so much time convincing myself I was being paranoid or insecure, when really my subconscious was picking up on patterns my conscious mind didn't want to see. Your instincts exist for a reason. They're processing information faster than your rational mind can keep up with, noticing micro-expressions and inconsistencies and changes in behavior that don't register consciously, but still trigger alarm bells. When those alarm bells are ringing, listen to them. Investigate. Ask questions. Don't let anyone make you feel crazy for paying attention to your own feelings. Second, document everything. From the moment I started keeping records of Tom's charges, his locations, his messages, I felt less crazy. Because gaslighting works by making you doubt your memory, by insisting that things didn't happen the way you remember them. But screenshots don't lie. Credit card statements don't lie. GPS data doesn't lie. If you're in a situation where you're constantly being told your perception is wrong, Where conversations you remember differently are denied or twisted, start documenting. Not to be paranoid, but to have an objective record you can refer back to when someone tries to rewrite history. Write down dates and times of conversations. Screenshot suspicious messages or charges. Keep a journal of events as they happen. It sounds exhausting, and it is, but it's also protecting your sanity and potentially protecting your future if the situation deteriorates to the point of needing legal intervention. Third, build your support system before you need it. I was extraordinarily lucky to have Claire, someone who believed me even when I didn't fully believe myself, who helped me plan and execute my exit strategy, who showed up for me when I was falling apart. But many women in similar situations are isolated, either geographically or emotionally, cut off from friends and family who might help them see clearly. If you're reading this and something in your relationship doesn't feel right, reach out to someone you trust. Don't wait until you're in crisis. Build your network now, while you still have the energy and clarity to do so. Join groups, maintain friendships, cultivate relationships outside your marriage. And if you don't have anyone in your life you can trust with the truth, find a therapist, a support group, a crisis line. You don't have to face this alone, and you shouldn't have to. Fourth, understand that leaving is a process, not an event. I didn't wake up one morning and decide to destroy my marriage at a public party. I went through months of denial, of trying to make it work, of hoping I was wrong. And that's not weakness. That's human. Leaving a long-term relationship, especially one with children involved, especially one where you've built an entire life and identity together, is terrifying. You're not just leaving a person. You're dismantling an entire existence, losing friends and routines and the future you'd imagined. Give yourself permission to take the time you need to get ready, to process, to grieve, to plan. But also, and this is crucial, don't let fear keep you stuck forever. There's a difference between being patient with yourself and being paralyzed by what-ifs. If you know in your heart that the relationship is damaging you, that staying is costing you more than leaving would, then start taking steps, however small, toward your exit. Open a bank account in your own name. Talk to a lawyer. Research your options. You don't have to leave tomorrow, but you can start preparing to leave, and that preparation itself can be empowering. Finally, remember that healing isn't linear. Almost a year after that party, I still have days where I'm angry at Tom, where I'm sad about what we lost, where I question everything that happened, and wonder if I made the right choices. Trauma doesn't just disappear because you made a dramatic exit or got a favorable divorce settlement. It lives in your body, in your nervous system, showing up in unexpected ways at unexpected times. I have panic attacks sometimes, usually triggered by something small, a cologne that smells like Tom's, a song that reminds me of our wedding, couples I see who look happy together. I have trust issues that make dating complicated, a hypervigilance about being lied to that I'm working through in therapy. Recovery is messy and non-linear and exhausting. Be patient with yourself. Get professional help. Do the work. And understand that rebuilding takes time, but it is absolutely possible. You won't be the same person you were before. That person is gone, fundamentally changed by what happened. But you can become someone new, someone stronger and more authentic, someone who knows their worth and won't accept less than they deserve. So here I am now, on a warm summer evening in Brooklyn, sitting in my garden with a glass of wine, watching the sun set over the city in shades of orange and pink that take my breath away. My kids are inside arguing over what movie to watch tonight, and I can hear their voices through the open window. Familiar and precious and proof that we survived this intact if changed. Tomorrow I have a meeting with a publisher about turning my blog into a book, a memoir about betrayal and recovery, and finding yourself after you've lost everything you thought defined you. Next week, Emma starts high school and Jake starts middle school, and we'll navigate those transitions together, the three of us. Our little family that's different than it was, but still whole in its own way. And I'm okay. More than okay, actually. I'm free in a way I haven't been in years, maybe ever. Free from lies, from pretending, from diminishing myself to fit into someone else's version of who I should be. This isn't just a story about a broken promise or a forgotten date, or even an affair. This isn't even really about Tom, in the end. It's about reclaiming my life after someone tried to steal it from me with lies and manipulation. It's about refusing to disappear into someone else's narrative about who I should be and how I should react. It's about teaching my children, especially my daughter, that you don't have to accept betrayal quietly, that women can fight back, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is tell the truth, even when it destroys everything you thought you knew. I started this story standing in a restaurant doorway, my world collapsing around me as I watched my husband with another woman. I'm ending it in a garden I planted myself, in a home that's truly mine, with a future that belongs to me and no one else. That's not closure. Exactly. I don't think you ever fully closed the door on 15 years of your life, on a love that was real even if the person wasn't. But it's something better than closure. It's possibility. It's knowing that I can survive anything, that I'm stronger than I thought, that the worst thing that ever happened to me didn't destroy me. It changed me, scarred me, reshaped me from the inside out, but I'm still here, still standing, still capable of joy and hope, and maybe, someday, love again. And that's worth more than any marriage built on lies ever could be. So now I want to hear from you. Whether you're in Los Angeles at dawn, or New York at midnight, or somewhere across the world where it's already tomorrow. Whether you're listening to this on your commute or in your kitchen or lying in bed unable to sleep because your own relationship is showing cracks you're afraid to examine, I want to know, what would you have done? Would you have confronted Tom privately? Would you have tried to save the marriage, go to counseling, find a way to forgive? Would you have done what I did, exposing him publicly and burning everything down? Or would you have found some third path I didn't see? Some way of handling this that was different entirely? And if you've been through something similar, if you've faced betrayal in your own life, how did you handle it? How are you healing? What do you wish you'd known before it happened? Leave a comment and let me know. Let's start a conversation, because these stories matter. They matter to the women going through them right now, feeling alone and crazy and wondering if they're overreacting. They matter to the people who love someone going through it, trying to figure out how to help. They matter because talking about betrayal, really talking about it without sugarcoating or making excuses, that's how we change the narrative. That's how we stop accepting lies and manipulation as just part of marriage, part of life. And if this story resonated with you, if you saw yourself in any part of it, if it made you think or feel or question something you'd been avoiding examining, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's going through their own version of this story and needs to know they're not alone. Subscribe so you don't miss the next story, because there's always another story, always another voice that needs to be heard. Until the next story, take care of your heart. Guard it fiercely, but don't let fear make you cage it completely. Trust carefully, but trust when it's earned. And remember, you deserve honesty. You deserve respect. You deserve a love that doesn't require you to doubt yourself or diminish yourself or accept lies. Don't settle for less. Take care of yourselves out there. And remember, the truth might hurt, but lies hurt more.